Right now, as you sit there, your brain is quietly negotiating with you. It's calculating the exact minimum amount of effort it can get away with today while keeping you comfortably numb. Look at your screen, look at your hands, and pay attention to that persistent, low-level itch in the back of your mind, the urge to scroll, to check your notifications, to reach for that drink, that vape, that substance, or that quick hit of digital dopamine. We call it a bad habit, a vice, or an addiction. But in behavioral mechanics, it's something far more precise. It's a biological leash. Here is the cold, terrifying truth. Your brain has been hijacked. Every time you give in to a quick dopamine hit, you aren't just engaging in a minor indulgence. You are actively rewiring your neural architecture to reward escape and penalize focus. You are training your nervous system to tolerate mediocrity. You wonder why you can't finish that project, why you can't build that business, why your relationships lack depth, or why you feel perpetually exhausted despite doing nothing all day. It's not because you lack talent, and it's not because you were born without potential. It's because your neurochemistry has been calibrated to seek cheap, effortless relief over high-value, long-term accomplishment. If you click away from this right now, your brain wins the negotiation. You will step right back into the familiar, warm bath of your automated routines. You'll tell yourself you'll start fresh on Monday, or after the weekend, or when conditions are perfect. But we both know that day never comes. In this speech, I am going to break down the exact biological loop that keeps you trapped in addiction, reveal how your body language and environment quietly betray your progress, and hand you a non-negotiable protocol to reset your dopamine baseline and achieve any goal you set for yourself. Stay until the end, and you get the blueprint to completely reclaim your life. Walk away, and you leave your future in the hands of a hijacked system. The decision is yours, but remember, you are making it right now. Every human being alive is governed by a fundamental biological principle. Your brain will always choose the path of maximum relief for minimum energy expenditure. When you feel stressed, bored, anxious, or overwhelmed, your nervous system experiences a spike in friction. If you have trained your mind to resolve that friction by reaching for a phone, a drink, a cigarette, or a screen, your brain logs that shortcut as a survival mechanism. It doesn't care that the habit is destroying your health, your bank account, or your ambition. It only knows one thing. It worked to kill the pain. Over time, this loop hardens into a neural highway. You aren't choosing the addiction anymore. The addiction is choosing you. It executes automatically before your conscious mind even realizes what's happening. Most people try to restart their lives using willpower. They make loud declarations, write out ambitious resolutions, and try to force themselves into discipline through sheer grit. It fails every single time. Why? Because willpower is a finite biological battery that drains with every decision, every stressor, and every hour of the day. When your willpower hits zero at 9 p.m., your subconscious mind takes the wheel. And if your subconscious identity is still programmed as someone who is stressed, helpless, or reliant on quick fixes, it will steer you right back to your vice. You cannot outfight a subconscious program using conscious effort. You have to rewrite the code entirely. Restarting your life is not an emotional event. It is a structural redesign. Clean out your environment until slipping up requires heroic effort. Build automated routines that push you into action before your mind has time to debate. Hold yourself to an unshakable standard in private, where nobody is watching, because that is where your true baseline is forged. You do not need better luck, better circumstances, or more time. You need absolute ownership over your nervous system. Wipe the slate clean, reclaim your focus, kill the excuses, restart your life, and go take what belongs to you. Compulsive behaviors and addictions are not failures of character, moral flaws, or evidence of a weak spirit. They are automated neural loops engineered by your brain to seek immediate relief from baseline discomfort. For decades, traditional narratives have framed addiction as a personal shortcoming, convincing individuals that their inability to stop a destructive habit stems from an intrinsic lack of discipline or integrity. This perspective is not only scientifically inaccurate, it actively sabotages recovery by triggering intense feelings of shame, which in turn drive the individual right back into the coping mechanism. To understand addiction with absolute clarity, you must strip away the emotional judgments and look directly at the neurobiology of human survival. Your brain was designed through millions of years of evolution to perform two primary functions: minimize pain and conserve energy. When faced with stress, emotional distress, fatigue, or social anxiety, your nervous system experiences a sharp rise in internal friction. If you discover a substance, a digital stimulus, or a behavior that rapidly eliminates that friction, your brain logs that activity not as an indulgence, but as an extraordinarily efficient survival tool. This process operates through a powerful subconscious reinforcement mechanism driven by dopamine. Dopamine is not the molecule of pleasure. It is the neurotransmitter of anticipation, motivation, and learning. When a behavior produces a rapid surge of dopamine, the brain highlights the environmental cues and internal states that preceded the hit. It creates an automated neural pathway, a shortcut, that connects baseline discomfort directly to the solution. Over time, as this neural pathway is repeatedly traveled, it becomes thick, fast, and deeply ingrained in the basal ganglia, the region of the brain responsible for habit execution. At this point, the behavior transitions from a conscious choice to an automated routine. The brain bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational decision-making, long-term planning, and self-control entirely. You are no longer consciously deciding to engage in the habit. Your nervous system is executing a pre-programmed biological script before your conscious mind even has time to evaluate the consequences. Relapse never begins at the exact moment you give in to a substance, open the app, or engage in the destructive behavior. It begins hours, days, or even weeks earlier in microscopic, unexamined physical compromises, subtle posture drops, and tiny environmental slips that pass entirely under your conscious radar. Most people fall into the trap of believing that relapse is a sudden, explosive event caused by an overwhelming surge of temptation. They imagine a scenario where they are completely fine 1 minute and then suddenly powerless the next. But behavioral mechanics reveals a far more insidious truth. Relapse is a slow, methodical degradation of your internal baseline. Long before the conscious mind rationalizes the bad decision, your physiology and your immediate surroundings begin broadcasting the microsignals of an impending breakdown, quietly setting the stage for the automated neural loop to take back control of your choices. To understand how these micro-triggers operate, you must examine the profound bidirectional link between your posture, your physiology, and your subconscious mind. When your discipline begins to slip, the very first casualty is not your intention, but your physical stance. Your shoulders drop inward by a fraction of an inch. Your respiratory rate shifts from deep diaphragmatic breathing into shallow chest breaths. Your facial muscles relax into a posture of passive fatigue, and your physical movements slow down. These micro-behavioral changes are nonverbal leaks of internal compromise. They send an immediate biological signal back to your central nervous system that you have shifted from an active, high-authority state into a passive, defensive state. In this compromised physical baseline, your brain's tolerance for friction drops drastically, making you infinitely more vulnerable to the pull of cheap, effortless dopamine rewards. Simultaneously, microslips in your physical environment begin to accumulate. It starts with small, seemingly irrelevant concessions, leaving your phone on the nightstand instead of across the room, allowing clutter to pile up on your desk, staying up 15 minutes past your hard boundary, or placing yourself in social contexts that carry subtle associations with your old habits. You convince yourself that these minor details do not matter because you still possess the intellectual desire to stay on track. But your subconscious mind registers every single environmental slip as a lowering of the standard. Each small concession reduces the physical and mental friction required to execute the bad habit, effectively building a smooth downhill runway directly toward the outcome you claimed you wanted to avoid. Achieving anything extraordinary in life requires an aggressive, intentional lowering of your threshold for stimulation, so that hard, high-friction effort becomes naturally engaging and rewarding again. In modern society, the average human brain is subjected to an unprecedented, continuous flood of artificial dopamine. Digital notifications, endless short-form content, hyper-palatable foods, and instant gratification systems bombard your nervous system, elevating your neurological baseline to unnaturally high levels. When your brain becomes accustomed to this constant stream of cheap, high-yield dopamine, its internal receptors downregulate to protect themselves from overstimulation. The terrifying consequence of this neurobiological adaptation is that ordinary, high-value human activities, such as reading a complex book, focusing on deep work, exercising intensely, or building a long-term project, suddenly feel agonizingly boring, draining, and impossible to sustain. You haven't lost your capacity for focus or ambition. You have simply calibrated your brain to operate only in response to extreme, effortless rewards. To break this cycle and unlock elite levels of performance, you must execute a systematic dopamine baseline reset. This is not a trendy wellness phase or an act of self-deprivation. It is an engineering protocol designed to restore your nervous system's sensitivity to natural rewards. When you aggressively starve your brain of cheap, low-effort dopamine hits, a remarkable biological transformation takes place. As the artificial stimulation dries up, your brain's dopamine receptors begin to upregulate, increasing their sensitivity to lower concentrations of the chemical. Over a relatively short window of strict discipline, your neurological threshold drops back to its natural baseline. In this recalibrated state, tasks that previously felt like unbearable chores suddenly regain their intrinsic appeal. Deep focus becomes satisfying. The friction of learning feels engaging, and the steady, quiet work of building a life becomes your primary source of momentum and fulfillment. This reset completely alters your relationship with effort and discomfort. When your dopamine baseline is elevated, effort feels like a punishment because your brain is constantly comparing the friction of work to the effortless pleasure of your vices. But when your baseline is restored, effort itself becomes the primary driver of dopamine release. Your brain begins to associate the process of pushing through difficulty, solving complex problems, and maintaining self-control with a deep, sustainable sense of accomplishment. You stop needing external hype, artificial rewards, or constant validation to take action, because the execution of hard tasks directly satisfies your nervous system's appetite for progress. You transition from a passive consumer seeking constant entertainment into an active, self-directed individual capable of sustained, unbroken concentration on long-term objectives. Mastering this protocol requires you to treat your neurological bandwidth as your most sacred asset. You must aggressively guard the inputs you allow into your mind, treating every cheap dopamine source as a direct threat to your ability to achieve high-level goals. Strip away the constant background noise, eliminate useless digital distractions, and embrace periods of quiet, high-friction focus as your standard operational environment. By systematically lowering your stimulation threshold, you align your neurochemistry with your deepest ambitions, making hard work not just possible, but completely natural and inevitable. Relying on willpower to drive long-term behavioral change is an operational flaw that virtually guarantees continuous internal negotiation and eventual burnout. Willpower is a finite biological resource, a temporary boost generated by the prefrontal cortex that depletes rapidly as you navigate stress, decision fatigue, and physical exhaustion throughout the day. When you attempt to quit a habit or build a high-performance life using sheer willpower alone, you set up an exhausting internal debate every single time friction appears. One part of your brain demands the comfort of the old routine, while the conscious part tries to force compliance through force of will. This constant psychological friction drains your cognitive bandwidth and leaves you completely vulnerable the exact moment your energy drops. True, permanent transformation never occurs at the level of conscious effort. It happens when you recalibrate the subconscious identity script that governs your default choices. Your subconscious mind operates as a high-speed guidance system, constantly executing decisions that align with your core identity, the deeply held, often unexamined beliefs you hold about who you are. If your underlying identity script still views you as someone who struggles with addiction, lacks discipline, or succumbs to stress, your subconscious will consistently work to bring your external actions into alignment with that internal reality. When you say, "I am trying to quit," or "I am trying to be disciplined," you communicate to your nervous system that your natural state is one of struggle and indulgence, and that disciplined behavior is an abnormal, temporary effort. The moment your conscious vigilance fades, your subconscious executes a course correction, steering you straight back to the old baseline that feels consistent with your true identity. You cannot outthink, outmotivate, or outfight a toxic environment. You must engineer a frictionless operational structure that renders your bad habits logistically impossible and your highest goals completely inevitable. Human beings possess a deeply ingrained tendency to overestimate the power of conscious intent, while wildly underestimating the silent, constant influence of their immediate physical surroundings. Your environment is not a neutral backdrop against which your life plays out. It is an active, persistent force that continuously shapes your choices, triggers your automated routines, and dictates your energy expenditure. If your spatial layout is littered with visual cues associated with quick dopamine hits, low standards, or easy distractions, your brain is forced to spend a continuous stream of cognitive energy fighting off those subtle temptations. In a battle between willpower and a poorly designed environment, the environment wins every single time because it never grows tired. Eliminating destructive behaviors and achieving high-level objectives is fundamentally an engineering challenge aimed at manipulating the friction of your choices. Friction is the physical, mental, or temporal effort required to execute an action. To eradicate bad habits, your primary objective is to artificially inflate the friction surrounding those behaviors until executing them becomes an irritating, multi-step process that interrupts the brain's automated loop. If reaching for a distraction requires you to walk to another room, unlock a container, or enter a long password, that added friction creates a critical window of delay. In that window, your prefrontal cortex has time to wake up, evaluate the decision, and override the impulse. Conversely, to make your goals inevitable, you must strip away every micro layer of friction separating you from execution, setting up your environment so that initiating the right work is the easiest, most frictionless choice available. This structural redesign requires a ruthless, objective audit of every space you inhabit: your home, your workspace, your digital devices, and your social architecture. You must view every physical object and digital interface not merely as a tool, but as a silent command directed at your nervous system. Clean out your immediate line of sight so that only the inputs that align with your new standard are visible and accessible. Remove the temptations entirely rather than testing your ability to ignore them day after day. If a specific app, substance, or environment consistently pulls you down to a lower baseline, treat its presence as a direct threat to your future and eliminate it from your space with zero hesitation. You are creating a fortress of focus that protects your nervous system from the friction of constant decision-making. When your environment is engineered with absolute precision, self-discipline ceases to be a daily battle of will and becomes an effortless side effect of your system. You no longer have to force yourself to focus because there is nothing left in your immediate environment to pull you away. You stop negotiating with your comfort zone because the path to indulgence has been blocked by deliberate physical design. By mastering the protocol of environmental control, you take complete command of the context that governs your choices, transforming your surroundings into an unyielding structure that pushes you directly toward absolute self-mastery.